Mayorkas might be more like Mayork out. The House Homeland Security Committee released articles of impeachment against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas over the weekend, arguing that he, quote, has demonstrated that he will remain a threat to national and border security, the safety of the American people, and to the Constitution if allowed to remain in office. Mayorkas has come under heavy fire from Republicans over what they say is an utter failure to maintain the integrity of the southern border.
Meanwhile, new details have emerged of a bipartisan Senate deal brokered by Republican James Lankford and Democrat Chuck Schumer aimed at addressing the issues on the border. Some of the provisions of that deal include mandatory detention of all single adults, a mandatory shutdown of the border once average daily migrant encounters hits 5,000, a new removal authority to immediately remove all migrants who do not have valid asylum claims. But the bill currently seems to be DOA in the House, with many House GOP members citing the 5,000 per day number as unacceptable. Senator Lankford went on Fox News yesterday to try to allay fears over that particular part of the deal. Let's take a look.
Hear it. Right now, there's internet rumors is all that people are running on. It would be absolutely absurd for me to agree to 5,000 people a day. This bill focuses on getting us to 0 illegal crossings a day. There's no amnesty. It increases the number of Border Patrol agents. It increases asylum officers. It increases detention beds so we can quickly detain and then deport individuals. It ends catch and release. It focuses on additional deportation flights out. It changes our asylum process so that people get a fast asylum screening at a higher standard and then get returned back to their home country. This is not about letting 5,000 people in a day.
Here now to discuss the border and the potential border deal is border reporter and author of the Mostly Peaceful Substack, Julio Rosas. Julio, welcome to Rising.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So what are we to make of this deal? Lankford, I think, taking a lot of heat from many conservatives who are not super pleased with it. Donald Trump and I believe Speaker Johnson urging them to hold out and not approve the deal. There we saw him on Fox News kind of disputing much of the what was being claimed about it. What's your take?
Well, I mean, just like with a lot of people, we want to see what's actually in it. And the reporting on it from, kind of the leaks is pretty consistent. So that's why it's pretty significant that Senator Lankford is saying that the 5,000 illegal immigrants per day before the shutdown order kicks in is pretty significant. Bill Maloogian, who's a good friend of mine, I mean, he reported the same thing. I trust his reporting. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we just need to know exactly what's going on because that's one of the big things, because everything else that you kind of laid out sounds good, but if that doesn't really kick in until they reach a certain number, which by the way, 5,000 per day is historically just not even. I mean, that alone is still pretty bad. Things are bad as it is with 7,000, 8,000 per day. But you have to remember that Obama's DHS Secretary Jed Johnson said that 1,000 illegal crossings per day he considered it to be a crisis. So we're 5 times that if that is the case. So at the end of the day, we just need to figure out what exactly is in this, and that's why people are frustrated by this, because we're going off of kind of word of mouth, even though the reporting has been consistent.
So this has been described as the most strict immigration bill in modern history. The 5,000 number is, of course, not that indiscriminately 5,000 people are allowed to come, but simply that when 5,000 interactions at the border are registered in one day, basically the legal asylum process, which is the basis of so much of what we're proud of in the United States of America, gets suspended. And even if people do have legitimate asylum claims, it's simply a capture and return policy. And that after that goes into effect, the number actually goes down to 3,000 and change, and it has to stay at that number for a period of time until it resets back to the 5,000 number again. So it is more strict than even being described in the clip we're seeing so far. And in light of how severe this immigration policy is, it does suggest that Biden has really bent the knee to Republican demands here. And yet now Republicans seem not to want to agree to much of what they've been asking for throughout. Democrats are now saying that Republicans are flip-flopping on their policy and that this is a political dance now, knowing that immigration is such a motivating factor for conservatives going into an election year. The argument now is that they will resist any legislation put forward, regardless of how bipartisan it is and regardless of how strict it is, because it benefits Donald Trump and Republicans, assuming that he's the nominee, of course, in an election year, to be seen as the ones that are active on immigration while Joe Biden is not. So what incentives here exist for Biden to keep trying to push for policy and legislation as opposed to using his executive authority to basically do what he'd like at the border?
Well, he already has. And that's the thing. To solve the acute problem at the border, it doesn't need a bill from Congress. All of this is stemming from the executive branch. I've been saying this for many years now. Biden, on day one, undid so many policies at the executive level that Donald Trump was doing because it was racist, it was xenophobic, it was all this kind of liberal reasoning. And that is what caused this dramatic surge that we've seen over the past couple of years. So I'm not saying Congress doesn't have a role in the broader debate and problem of immigration as a whole. But in order to solve to stem the current flow, Biden just needs to undo what he undid on day one. I mean, he remember, he started off his administration by trying to halt deportations for 100 days. I was in Tijuana shortly after that went into effect, and we were talking to migrants in Mexico, and they specifically cited that they wanted to get into the United States while this 100-day deportation ban was still in effect. Now that got later overturned, but that was the mode, that was the kind of mindset that the Biden administration put forth early on, and they've continued it since then. So I think it's disingenuous for people to say, well, Republicans are now all of a sudden, they don't want to solve this because they want to make this an election issue. But it's like, well, no, because again, this is not necessarily a problem that was created by the legislative branch. This was a problem created by the executive branch. Now, like I said, for the other issues that deal with immigration in terms of asylum laws and all that, yes, obviously Congress does play a role. But Biden can solve this tomorrow if he wanted to. But him and his administration don't want to because they view the policies as too harsh. And that's why they undid it.
Do you have any insight into what is going on with enforcement at the border, given the emergency injunction at the Supreme Court level saying that the federal government can go in and cut the wire that Texas law enforcement put up? We're hearing people are wondering whether if that's actually what's going to happen, how people on the ground there, law enforcement on the ground there, actually feel about the issue. You've been at the border in the past. Do you have any insight into how it's being received?
Well, I can tell you that I was just in Eagle Pass just last week, and this Shelby Park, which is where a lot of people were crossing because it's very easy from people from Mexico to illegally cross into Eagle Pass, that area is now shut down. It's seeing very, very little traffic, and just even a month ago, back in December, we were seeing thousands of people cross into that specific area. So because not only are the extra barriers and razor wire are in place, but if somehow people are managed to get through that, Texas is arresting them for trespassing. So that has decreased crossings there. But as things go, that's only 2 miles along the Del Rio sector. So there are significant illegal crossings that are still happening around the area in Kinney County, Maverick County, and so on and so forth. So it is basically playing whack-a-mole, and that's why I think the kind of cycle of Texas is defying the Supreme Court is a little one, it's not necessarily true, but it's also a little overblown because there's still other areas that Texas doesn't have kind of that state authority that they've made along the border because people are still able to get around. And that just goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that there are policies in place at the federal level that are incentivizing people to come, and that's why they're able to do that in broad daylight.
You mentioned that you believe that Joe Biden could stop the flow of immigration at the border tomorrow using executive orders. Do you advocate for Biden to use executive authority and go around Congress in that way? And what executive orders specifically are you thinking of?
Well, I would say that he can go back to remain in Mexico. People want to talk about the border wall, and yes, that was obviously another thing that he did, and that certainly plays a role in it. But there's other policies. There were third country agreements that the Trump administration made that the Biden administration also undid. So, me personally, I'm not for the executive branch to just wield its power willy nilly. Although both sides have done that. But if you're going to do that, then at least do something that actually helps the country address the issue as opposed to making the problem 10 times worse.
Julio Rosas, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.